I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's live edition. It is January 16th, 2014. I'm sure a lot of you are wondering where I have been for the past few days. I took Tuesday and Wednesday off this week. I had a bit of a longer weekend. I had as you all know, I've been keeping you in the loop. I've had surgery about going on almost a month ago already. Time flies. It's amazing how fast actually the whole time period went since the surgery. Honestly, it's like just yesterday I had it, but it's going to be coming up on a month at the end of the week, and I've been doing physical therapy and stuff. I have to learn how to walk again. So the past couple days have been, I've had a lot of doctor's appointments, a lot of PT, and it's just physically exhausting. So I decided rather than come on air and give you guys a half-assed radio show, because it's just not how I roll. I won't do things half-assed, and I don't do things, ripshod. I'm not like that. So anyway, I decided to, instead of me coming on and doing a horrific show because I was exhausted, I would rather you guys hear a better quality broadcast. So I picked two different archives that I thought that you guys would enjoy. I think they're really good shows, including the one broadcast I did about service dogs and the plight of disabled people with service dogs. Hopefully that opened up some people's eyes. Hopefully maybe that even encouraged some people to go rescue a dog and train it as a service animal for somebody else. You end up healing two lives. Interesting. Anyway, tonight I want to get into a bit of a darker topic. And if I have time, I'm going to cover a couple other health-related issues. Today is going to be as much time spent as I possibly can on getting the information out about what happened with Fukushima. Now, I'm not going to go over the whole thing about, we all know what happened. There was a tsunami. You can argue whether that was man-made or not. That's a separate side issue. Tsunami, earthquake. The plant is leaking. They had what they called a hydrogen explosion in one of the buildings. They've got meltdowns going on, which is what's really going on. Just really, really bad. Spewing radiation into the atmosphere on a daily basis. This is, radioactive water being dumped into the Pacific Ocean on a daily basis. TEPCO lying about it. Japanese government officials lying about it. Our government officials lying about it. It's really a mess. So everybody knows that part. What I'm trying to do more, because, and I admittedly, just because you get bogged down in so many things, I have not been covering Fukushima as much as I should have. I mean, I have in the past. I've talked about it. I've had people on. I've done broadcasts where it was specifically just Fukushima. But as of late, I have not been covering it enough in my eyes. So, like last week, I spent a couple, at least some period of time of some of the segments discussing Fukushima and what happened. And tonight, I'm actually going to focus on the sailors on board the U.S.S. Ronald Reagan, one of our newer supercarriers, which is now completely contaminated and permanently irradiated. I don't care how much you scrub the decks down. I don't care how much you say you sprayed things down. That thing got hit by a plume of radiation. And without a doubt, that thing is going to be radioactive for a very long time. It does not matter how much you scrub down the outsides of that thing. There's just no way they're going to get every inch of radiation off of that thing. Plus the exposure, once that thing's exposed to radiation, once the radiation gets into certain parts of the ship, what about the air ducts? It's got to pull the air from somewhere, right? I don't care what kind of filters you have. The air ducts themselves will have radioactive material. And I'm telling you, they didn't scrub the ship down that clean. I mean, if they gave it like a real decontamination, then maybe, I don't know, maybe I'd say that the ship is salvageable. But as an engineer and a former sailor myself, I can tell you I wouldn't go on that ship. If I was in the Navy and they said, Popeye, congratulations, you got new orders, man. Guess where you're going? Where? We're going to put you on the Ronald Reagan. Isn't that awesome? Huge supercarrier. I'd be like, can I scrub toilets at boot camp, please? I think I'd rather clean the latrines in boot camp for, go back and be like the company commander's little toilet scrubber than go on board that ship. Seriously. I wouldn't go on board the Ronald Reagan, dude. I'd be like, you know what? I volunteer to scrub crap tanks somewhere. Seriously. There's no way I would want to go on board that ship. I wouldn't trust it. I don't trust them. The government telling me, oh, it's okay. I've heard that before. Trust me. Trust me. Being a disabled vet, I've heard that before when I wasn't disabled, when I was able-bodied, or at least more able-bodied. The government lies to everybody. They don't worry. Vaccines are safe. Anthrax vaccine. Why don't you ask Joe Joseph about the anthrax vaccine? Some of the stuff Joe has to go through. He deals with pain. He's got back problems because of that thing. You can start to actually do some research. You'll see that that's one of the things that one of the side effects of some of the cocktails that we've been injected with. But anyway, yeah, poor Joe has issues related to his vaccines and some of the other stuff that he was exposed to while he was in the Navy. I have my own issues. I have plenty of other friends. But hey, you can trust the government. I mean, the Navies wouldn't lie to you. Come on, the Navy would take care of you. Marines would never lie to you. Air Force would never lie to you. Army? They would never lie. And the Coast Guard, oh, well, they just never lie at all, do they? Right. And you know what? I wouldn't blame the ship's captain in the case of the Ronald Reagan. I actually feel bad for that whole ship's company, the entire ship's company, from the lowest sailor on there, an E2 or, when you graduate boot camp, you're in boot camp, you're an E1. You should automatically be like an E2 at least when you graduate. But we'll say even if there's an E1 on board the ship because they got busted down. So from like the lowest low E1 all the way on up to the old man, the captain of the ship, I feel bad for all of them. Because I'm sure that captain doesn't want to be irradiated himself, have any possible cancers, and be responsible for killing, 4,500, 5,500 sailors on board one of those things. Carriers are floating cities, in case people don't understand. There's literally people that have served on aircraft carriers and never met. Ever. Yes. They're huge. There's other interesting things that go on in carriers, like prostitution rings and their gangs and stuff like that. Oh, yeah. But that's besides the point. It has nothing to do with this right now, so... Dirty laundry in the military can get aired at another date for that kind of stuff. But in reference to what I'm talking about now, I don't blame the captain of the ship at all. Because he was probably told that it was safe by his higher-ups to go in there, and you guys got to go rescue. You're the Abraham Lincoln, listen to me. You're the Ronald Reagan. You're the U.S.S. Reagan. Get in there and save everyone. We're the Navy, the global force for good, sent right into a radiation plume. Now, who up the food chain might have known that that radiation plume was bad? I don't know. I can't point a finger, but somebody had to have. Somebody higher up or somewhere in the chain of information there knew that it was deadly, and they didn't tell that entire ship's company. So I don't blame people. A lot of people could say, oh, well, I blame the officers of that ship. No. If you listen to, I'm going to play some audio from some of the sailors on board that ship, you'll hear them say they don't blame the officers because they did everything in their power to turn the ship around and get the hell out of there and get away from the radiation plume. They were told that it was okay and safe to go there. You can say, well, what are you, a moron? I would know. Really, armchair quarterback, you would know. When you're in charge of a huge aircraft carrier and you're being told, go in there and they need help, humanitarian aid, and you're being told by your higher-ups it's okay to go in there, don't worry. The plume of radiation isn't coming your way. You would do it. If you were in that position, if you were trained to do it, you would do it. So I don't blame the chain of command on that ship at all. I don't blame anybody on that ship's company. I feel bad for every single one of those sailors, every one of those airmen, and every one of those Marines on board that ship, because they're all of them. Now, perhaps the ones on the inside maybe didn't get as much exposure. I don't care what kind of scrubbers they say they have on board that ship. I'm telling you, I'm willing to bet anybody that serves on board that ship for a period of time is going to get sick. And I'm willing to bet there's a lot more than only I think it's 71 sailors that have come forward now. I'm willing to bet there's a lot more of them. The only reason why we don't know about them is some of them have probably died already. Remember, there's a lot of older people in the military too. What happens if, they come back after that patrol and 3 months later suddenly one of them gets cancer and dies and they don't relate it to it? The military is certainly not going to relate it to it, so they don't talk about it. It goes away. That's how it works with depleted uranium. That's how it works with the anthrax vaccines. Remember, at a base level, the government is always going to wait for the person, whether they're active duty or a veteran, to drop dead well before they admit anything is wrong. Remember that. It's not honorable to become a glowing, like a glow stick where you glow in the dark and you can now read books without the aid of a nightlight. It's not honorable. It's not honorable to become dosed with that crap and kill yourself. What about your family, too? You come home, you have that crap on you. What happens if, in the case of depleted uranium, it happens? Soldiers, Marines come back from the battlefield. They have depleted uranium in their body, on their clothes. They go and they have relations with their wife. Because of the exchange of bodily fluids, the wife is exposed to the DU. It's in the bodily fluids. She gets cervical cancer, dies. This has actually happened in multiple cases, or other types of cancers. And they test positive for DU exposure. How could the wife of somebody who's never been on a battle, or the wife who's never been on a battlefield, possibly be exposed to DU, unless perhaps her husband was exposed to it on the battlefield? They won't tell you that kind of stuff, will they? Look at Agent Orange. It took him 50 years to admit that. My father just lost a close friend of his not too long ago, probably about a year ago now. Good Marine friend of his. Vietnam vet. My father was a Vietnam vet, too. He was in the Navy. He was at Airedale. One of his good friends, a Marine. He died. Cancer. Guy had multiple operations to remove tumors. They finally admitted, Agent Orange. Another friend of mine, host we've had on the show before, Ken Hildebrand. He's a Marine, retired Marine, door gunner on a helo, Vietnam. What do they call it? Asystemic heart disease or ischemic, whatever, however you pronounce it. He's got it. And they had finally admitted, it's related to the DU, it's related to the Agent Orange exposure. He was in a helo, a door gunner. He wasn't spraying it. He was around the areas of where it was being sprayed. It was in the air. How about the guys in the Navy that were just on board the ships transporting the barrels of it? And it wasn't just Agent Orange. There was other stuff there, too. All sorts of nifty chemicals. There was a Navy ship, and I can't remember the name of it right now, that it was so contaminated that they actually had to sink the ship. This thing was used to get rid of nuke waste for, I don't know, probably about, I guess like 30 years, 20, 30 years. All the sailors on board that ship that served on board that ship, all of them ended up coming down with one form of cancer or another. All of them. Most of them, if not all of them, are dead now. VA and the military denied that there was ever any connection or any exposure to radiation. Yet the ship was so radioactive they couldn't even scrap it. They had to sink it in the same spot that they were dumping the nuke waste. This is off the coast of New Jersey. You can go look this up. They irradiated an entire ship's company of sailors and then said, hey, we didn't do that. You don't get any benefits for that. That's the way our government works. See, we sign contracts with them. We sign a contract with the government as veterans to go do something. Marines, a lot of times you want to join a Marine Corps and you sign a contract, but in the contract it's to do a certain job for a certain period of time. A lot of times guys sign up to be in, infantry. I signed a contract to go into infantry. I'm so excited. Woohoo. Problem is the government won't keep up their end of that contract when that poor guy gets his leg blown off. They'll bust his balls, jerk his chain. I saw in one instance a soldier got nailed in the leg by a sniper. The medics, when they're there, or if you're a Marine, the corpsmen come up. They start coming. They start coming up and they start cutting off your BDUs and your pants and your shirt. They don't care about that. They're trying to save your life. They're not, put it in a neat pile over here. A lot of times some of that stuff actually gets left on the battlefield. This guy got charged. Because they couldn't, I think it was part of his uniform, I think his flak jacket, because they took his flak jacket off of him. And when you're laying there bleeding half to death and you're getting worked on by 2 or 3 medics, especially in a helicopter, you're not asking, hey, where are you guys going to put my flak jacket? And there was a grenade in the flak jacket that, believe it or not, you have to account for. Long story short, if you don't chuck it. Well, long story short, this guy ended up getting billed. Look this up. He was getting billed by the government out of his VA benefits. He was only getting, 20, 30% as a rating, which is nothing. It's like $200 a month they give you. And he was walking forever in a brace with a cane, and his leg is all jacked up because he got shot in the leg with an AK-47. Believe it or not, the wound pocket that thing creates does a lot of damage. Anyway, so this guy's permanently disabled because of his time in the service. And they were taking money out of his VA benefits. They did the same thing to me, believe it or not. I had to fight 6.5, almost 7 years to prove to them that I didn't, that I had whatever. I didn't even want to argue about paying them back, but that they were overcharging me. They said that I owed them a certain amount of money, which I shouldn't have owed them any money. But I when you get out, if they medically discharge you, you get severance pay. It's usually not a lot. Long story short, I got a tiny little amount. And when you get veterans benefits, the government actually makes you pay that severance pay back. I'm not kidding. Now, think about that. You get severance pay because they're ending your career. They're medically retiring you. Honorable discharge. I had, full fanfare when I got out. I had my, everybody in my chain of command showed up. People shaking my hands. Everybody, all well and good. But they medically retired me. So it's like being, when you get let go from a job, they give you a severance package, right? Well, when I went and had to hook up with the VA, and all vets go through this, if you get any form of severance pay, no matter how small, how large, they make you pay it back. Now, I was authorized to receive up to a certain amount, but I only got about a 20th of that amount. Well, because I was authorized to receive up to a certain amount, the VA decided I had to pay back that full amount, even though I didn't receive it, because it said I was authorized to, because of a typo. It took me almost 7 years to fix what one jerk-off did with a typo. One little typo. Now, Imagine how frustrating it is for somebody that I was smart enough that I have proof for all of my stuff and everything else. It took me a long time. It took me almost 8 years to get all my full medical benefits that I was due. But that's with dealing with me, with someone I write letters, I'm meticulous with record keeping, with stuff like that. I have records backing all my stuff up, even from my time in the military. I copied my entire military medical record before I left. I had friends that were corpsmen. Pays to know people and know what to do before you get out. Again, they don't tell most people this. And it took me that long. Now, can you imagine what's going to happen to these sailors and these guys that are exposed to DU? But for tonight's purposes, we'll focus on the Ronald Reagan sailors. Can you imagine what's going to happen to them? The government is not going to admit that radiation plume that they were exposed to, which you're going to hear about, the government's not going to admit that was even a problem or dangerous. So all these people that are getting sick, they need medical attention. They're not going to get it. A lot of them will be told, you'll have doctors say, well, there's no, if the government doesn't admit that the radiation was dangerous, and I don't understand how any doctor in his right mind could say, oh, that's fine. Of course, if it's a government doctor, I understand, because that's what they do. But you look at these people, they're all going to get sick. They're going to get blamed for malingering. You watch. I'm willing to bet a lot of them have already been told, oh, it's a mental problem, it's in your head. Yeah, because cancer and not being able to walk and bleeding through my skin and people losing the ability to even use their legs, yeah, that's normal. That has nothing to do with any exposure to radiation, right? Just like the officials on the west coast of this country are telling people there's a 1,400% spike in the radiation levels on the West Coast. And they're telling people don't be alarmed. There's nothing to worry about. It's not harmful radiation. Really? There's a difference between harmful radiation and non-harmful radiation? I'll bet at least half of the listeners out there will go, yeah, of course there is, Popeye. Wrong. All radiation is hazardous. All of it. Radiation exposure, if you're not exposed to a large amount, is cumulative. So if you're exposed to a low-level amount for a long period of time, guess what? It adds up. It's just like if you want to put it in terms you can understand, okay, let's make the human body a 5-gallon jug, okay? You could either have a large dose of radiation where you suddenly fill that 5-gallon jug in a minute and a half with water, whoop, or you could have a low dose of radiation over a long time exposure. How long were they there? About 3 or 4 weeks they were floating around all off the coast of Japan there. And guess what? Over the course of time, even if it's a slow trickle, that 5-gallon water bottle will fill up with water, won't it? Well, it's the same thing as your body with radiation. Doesn't matter if it's low-level doses or high-level doses. Radiation is not good for you. And the excuse of, well, there's radiation. A lot of us have radiation. Anybody, born after the 40s, or if you drink wine, if you drink wine that was bottled after the 40s, after the late 40s, you'll have, and I've seen evidence to back this up, that a lot of the wine will be radioactive. There'll be certain traces of radioactivity in the wine, and people go, what? Well, it's because of all the atmospheric testing they did. We all already have a certain amount of radiation in the food, in the water, in the air that surrounds us every day. That dates back to when they were testing nukes and blowing things up in the sky to have fun, and, ooh, what's this little red button do? This has been going on a very long time. Very, very, very long time. So yes, we're already irradiated, but the thing with Fukushima is really bad, and they're covering it up. I don't know how they think they're not going to be affected. I mean, the government is ordering potassium iodide for certain, members of certain agencies, like Health and Human Services, but I mean, it doesn't matter if you live in the White House and you're the president, if you're George Soros, whoever, you're going to be affected by this. I mean, leaving this thing alone and letting it just fester, it's poisoning the entire northern hemisphere. And there are people that'll go, oh, you're being a fearmonger. Stop being a fearmonger. Fukushima's not that bad. I'm not worried about it. Yeah, because you can stick your head in the sand and pretend there's nothing wrong because that feels comfortable to you, or you could face reality and we could do something about it. Why haven't we faced reality, and why didn't they do something about it 3 years ago? Even the Russians were like, start dumping concrete on that thing right when it first happened. How come the Japanese didn't say to the world, look, we need to stave the entire northern hemisphere. Let's all stop battling each other and figure out how to deal with this problem. How come nobody's working on that? No. Let's keep focusing on Syria and Assad. He's such a douche. We have to back Al-Qaeda. I mean, the rebels. I mean, do you not see? Like, Fukushima is really a problem. We can hear the evidence that I'm going to play for you guys. You'll see what I'm talking about. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Fukushima is a real problem. So I wanted to focus some more on it tonight so we get back to U.S.S. Ronald Reagan sailors. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. So this segment, I'm going to play for most of the segment. It's a press conference with two quartermasters that were on the Ronald Reagan. And this should piss you off. Because this press conference with these two quartermasters, where you're going to hear them talk about the health issues that they've endured since being exposed. This is only one clip. Wait, I got more testimony for you for the rest of the show. But I'm going to play this for you, and this is the longest one, so I want to get this one first because it's a nice long segment. But this happened, this press conference dates back to last year, March 11th of 2013. That's right. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. This press conference, what you're going to hear, this testimony, is 10 months old. Over 10 months old. Where the hell's the mainstream media? Where was the media talking about this, huh? Where's all these veterans organizations and everybody else? Oh, we stand behind our soldiers and sailors, Marines and airmen and Coast Guardsmen. We love all of you. Yeah. Only as political footballs. Let's listen to see what these two quartermasters have to say.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jamie Plume. I'll just kind of give you a chronological timeline of what happened. We were already on deployment in 2011. We were about to pull into a routine port call in South Korea. We go to our navigation brief the night before we were going to pull in, and we found out that this tsunami and earthquake happened. Immediately, we knew that we were going to reroute the ship to Japan to provide aid and, give them food, water. So we did that immediately. We probably got to the coast of Japan probably the day after it happened. We never heard anything about a nuclear power plant. We never knew anything about the possibility, let alone any kind of leak. So we were there outside. Our job as quartermasters is not only navigating the ship, driving, plotting our course and track, but going outside at the top of the ship to raise flags to communicate with other ships. So being outside, we were breathing in this radiation. We were handling flags, which are porous, very porous material, obviously. The ropes that we use to haul the flags up are polyester, so again, a very porous material that just absorbed the radiation. We didn't really hear anything for probably a couple weeks after about a leak in the power plants. And even then it was just still considered kind of a rumor. The ship didn't really even go on lockdown, which I mean by that, like no one was allowed outside probably until about a month and a half after the 11th, March 11th. So we were outside breathing this in, handling stuff, handling materials, and just absorbing the radiation. I'll let Maurice talk about his medical issues that he's encountered, but I'll talk about mine. We didn't finish that deployment until October 2011, so we carried on with our deployment. About halfway through, probably around the summertime, my menstrual cycle just disappeared completely. And then it would come back and disappear and go on and off. And this happened until about the summer of 2012, where it came back in such full force that I was in and out of the emergency room. Once they thought they were going to have to do a blood transfusion on me because I had lost so much. They couldn't. I was still in the Navy for this past year. I got out this past January 2013, so I was still getting Navy care for that year. I was already on the birth control pill, which I guess they would do to control that kind of menstrual cycle. So the only thing that they could do is say, this is called dysfunctional uterine bleeding, and we can give you an IUD with hormones in it. And so now that's what I have. It hasn't really stopped it. I still have this issue, and now I have to pay for the medical costs of that. In addition to that, in February 2012, I developed bronchitis, and then from February to the summer of 2012, I got it 6 times. I was sent to a respiratory doctor, and it was determined that I developed asthma. So a lot of people don't understand that once you get out of the Navy, you don't get any health care at all. If you retire and you stay in 20 years, you get health care. But we only did 1 enlistment. I did 5 years, he did 4, so we don't get that unless it's a disability, a service-related disability, which dysfunctional uterine bleeding does not really count as a disability as of yet. So we're still fighting that case, and this is also what we're involved in a lawsuit against TEPCO for medical expenses that we're going to have to pay out of pocket for.
I'll speed it up because I know I don't have much time. I'll start with the beginning of my story where I received the radiation. A part of our job is we have to communicate with other ships using flags and semaphore and Morse code when we're doing special operations. And we store all our flags outside in a weather bag. We also fly our American flag, our ensign, at the highest point so people know we're the U.S. Navy. I was told by one of the higher-ups to go out and retrieve the American flag so we can give it to the Japanese as a friendship type of deal, like a gift. I pulled the flag down. It was flapping in the wind and wrapped around me. It got all over me. I folded it up. I took it down there. I gave it to them, and I'm not sure what they did with it, but I got off watch an hour later. I went to go get something to eat with one of my good friends. We stopped. I used the restroom, and we were just joking around because at the time there was still rumors going around about radiation being on the ship. And we were joking around about my growing extra fingers and toes and stuff like that. And we were like, let's stop and get checked for radiation, because they started setting up these little checkpoints all along the ship. And they were saying it's just a precaution. You don't have nothing to worry about. If you get some free time, just go get checked out. And we were joking and laughing, walking over there, and he gets checked first, and nothing happens. He gets his hands checked, and nothing happens, and he's like smirking like, I told you, this is just a waste of time. And I get my boots checked, my pants, and then my hands, and as soon as I get to my hands, the machine just goes crazy, and instantly, like, we went from like smiling to just being nervous and scared, and they instantly told everybody to back away from me. They made a perimeter around me, and they marched me to a decon station. The whole time they were telling everybody to stand fast, which means stay in your place and back up. And everybody's just looking and freaking out. And I had to hold my hands up, and I had bags on them. And they were telling everybody contaminated still, everybody just get back. And we make it to the decon station, and I see there's a huge pile of clothes there from other sailors. And I go in, and they had to remove 3 layers of skin off my hands and my arms. And it wasn't like back to back. They would scrub off 1 layer, and then I would have to wash off this orange grit stuff that you use to get off paint and oil. And then they would do it over again, and then check. And we'd start the process all over. So in my head, I was just kind of praying that the machine would stop beeping so I can get it over with. And nobody told me at the time, what was going on. Everybody just kind of told me just to stand there and be quiet and not to touch anybody or anything. It was almost like I had the plague. And finally, the machine stopped beeping, and they let me go back to my berthing. And that's when I got to my berthing. They called and asked me to come up on watch to relieve the people on watch, and they told me that I had received the highest amount of radiation out of anybody on a ship. And then later we found out that our work area, since it was outside, had the highest readings for radiation because of all our flags and all our line that we used to haul up stuff. And they cut off all the area to the rest of the ship.
How did you get suffocation symptoms?
2 months after, a lump appeared on my jaw, and I went and got that looked at by the Navy medical, and they told me that there was nothing they could do about it while we're out to sea, that we'd have to wait for us to pull in. And another lump appeared between my eyes. I have another lump on my right thigh. As soon as I got out of the military, I went back to college, and I started playing college sports again. And I actually ran within 3 seconds of an Olympic time for my track and field team. And slowly after that, my body just started to fall apart. It's harder for me to breathe now. It feels a lot like my lungs are too big for my body whenever I do something strenuous. I lost a lot of weight from the time I was in the Navy until now. I got stomach ulcers, and in the last month and a half, it doesn't look like it, but my hair's started to fall out. I try to avoid brushing and combing it, and I'll wash it every 3 days, just because I don't. It's like Navy tradition. When you get out, you grow out your hair and you grow out your beard, and because you're bald for so long, and it's just falling out, and I don't want to speed that up, so I try to avoid it.
And what did you have to sign?
A little bit after we found out that the ship was radiated and we had finished up helping out, we left the area, and before we pulled into our first port since the disaster, we all had to sign this paperwork saying that the military is not to be held liable for anything that happened, and we had to sign paperwork saying that we weren't sick, that we were okay, and that they did tests on us. And it wasn't like a yes or no type of option. It was just you have to sign it.
I wanted to ask about the immediate time. One of the products that comes out of the nuclear plant is radioactive iodine that's in your thyroid gland. Were you offered potassium iodine tablets to block your thyroid? And do you know, were people on the ship taking iodine tablets, potassium iodine tablets to protect their thyroids? What were you told about that?
We personally, we never knew that you were supposed to take iodine for radiation, and I later found out that the higher ups, like the CO, the XO, and anybody with a really important job, they got iodine tablets. The pilots got the iodine tablets, but the general enlisted sailors, we didn't get iodine tablets. We actually had a talk, me and my boss, and I was always a hard worker for him, so we always had a little friendship, joke around type of thing going on. And I thought he was joking when he told me, he was like, "Did you get your radiation medicine?" And I was like, "Radiation medicine? There's medicine for this?" And he had a smirk on his face, and I was like, "You're messing with me." He was like, "I got mine." He was like, "You didn't get yours?" And I took it as he was just joking around. And then later on we found out that they had gotten iodine tablets. So.
One of the hallmarks of the nuclear industry is secrecy, cover-up, and minimization. And you keep it a secret, but it sounds like a lot was kept secret from you, and perhaps still is. If you can't do that, you cover it up, and it sounds like that's happening to you. And then the minimization, if you can't do the first two, then it's no harm to you at all. What has happened with your care now? Two questions. Did you ever get a thyroid scan? And have your medical records available? What's happened with that?
Directly after I got out, we were told, I hate to say it, but it was almost like we were brainwashed because we were told that we didn't receive that much radiation, that the amount of radiation we got was the equivalent of standing next to somebody smoking a cigarette or suntanning on the beach for a whole day. So I had it in my head not to worry about it. And it actually, between Jamie crying at night saying you got to get checked, after more lumps started appearing and everything else, we started trying to get my medical records while Jamie was still in the Navy and stationed in Washington. And they actually lost all the medical stuff that I was involved with around that time. All they had was my records from boot camp, which was like a flu shot and other stuff.
The secrecy and cover-up is no different than when we used to set off nuclear weapons in Nevada, and we marched soldiers down around zero after the last wave occurred, with no monitoring of their radiation exposure whatsoever. And it sounds like you have gone through a similar process now. How old is that?
Are you getting any medical care?
No, like we said, I was in the Navy for the past year, so I did see the Navy gynecologist for my issues and the respiratory doctor, but they didn't give me any, like I said, they gave me a general term for a diagnosis and said, oh, well, we'll just give you an IUD. And he was out the past year. He got it exactly a year before me. And like I said, without any medical care or any benefits as far as this goes, and with him losing his record, we haven't been able to receive any care.
So, Maurice, have you ever been fully examined by a doctor?
I've never been fully examined. The closest thing I got to it was a couple of months after the scrub. They called me down to medical and they made me sit next to a machine just to see what was going on. And they told me I was good to go after that. And they told me they would keep tabs on me, but it never happened once I got out of the military.
Just talk about the helicopters for a minute.
We were on an aircraft carrier, so the helicopters are the ones that flew over onto land and to take food and water and supplies. And they would come back, obviously with radiation on the outside of them, so they would come back to the flight deck. And the people in the air department had to take, push brooms and soap and water and scrub the sides of the helicopters. And obviously that just drains off into the ocean. There's nowhere for it to go. And that's how they clean the radiation off of the helicopter.
Not only that, but we were trying to stay out of the winds, but for us to launch our helicopters, we need wind to lift them off the flight deck. So during the special evolutions, we were launching our aircraft, we had to go into the winds, which meant more radiation.
And the ship is now in port being decontaminated, is it? The aircraft carrier?
No, it's in dry dock, and they actually just left, I think, yesterday, but they were in dry dock for a year, but it's a routine, every 10 years the ship goes in there.
So Bob Alvarez just has something to say.
Just very briefly, having worked in the energy department, I'm familiar with the assets that the U.S. government has, and I would not be surprised that you were on an aircraft carrier, correct?
Yes.
That the U.S. has aerial radiological monitoring, which the military has on a continual basis, and so does the Department of Energy. And so they have probably done very extensive data collection, including collection of cloud samples, as well as doing remote sensing using lithium germanium detectors, so they could literally take a picture of what the energy readings would be coming off the ground as a function of distance and light. When the United States exploded nuclear weapons in the open air, there were about 250,000 military personnel who took part in the shocks, and it turned out that some of the most highly exposed groups were the ones who were maintaining the aircraft, washing them down. The other question I had, did they take any samples of your urine or any of your internal fluids at all? Did you have a whole body count?
They didn't do that for anybody on the ship.
Anyway, that's all I had.
So we should open the now conference for 10 minutes for questions from the media.
Dr. John Miller, did anybody tell you what dose, cumulative dose, they thought you got in those days? Did they give you any number in milligrams or grams?
When it first happened, they took me down there to the decon station. They were all talking and whispering and talking to each other, and I was trying to listen in, and I could never hear how much I actually received. But they told me that all the people that was radiated, later on my boss told me, well, he was talking to somebody else and he was yelling. He was like, I want to know how did the guy in our department get the highest count of radiation on his ship, and he's not even in the air department. And after that, that's when our whole department got sent down there to get tested for radiation. And they locked down all our weather decks, but they never told me the exact number of what I received.
So that, in fact, the Navy and the U.S. government absolutely knew what they were being exposed to purposely, yet they can't sue the U.S. government, so they're suing TEPCO for lying to them. But in fact, it's the U.S. government who's lying. And Jeff and I think Andy would be prepared to go to court to support these people who are suing TEPCO. Imagine the U.S. government.
How close you were to Fukushima, to the nuclear plant, and how long you were in the area?
We were in the area of the coast of Japan for about 2 months, and in that time we went from anywhere from 1 mile off the coast to 10 miles, and we just kind of went back and forth and did circles, up, down, east, west. We kind of just kept moving, but we would get 1 to 2 miles from the coast very frequently.
From the nuclear plant?
Right. That's what I mean. From the plant, we would get 1 to 2 miles from it. And so what we did was we plotted. We have our big charts of the ocean. We plotted the latitude and longitude of the plant. Basically, we drew a line 50 miles east of the plant, and then they used some calculation to make a triangle, and that was the plume that we were supposed to stay out of. But as we all know, that it just floats around. So
we were actually briefed not to tell the rest of the crew, since we did get a lot of information before everybody else, because we had to know where we were going and if it was safe and what was the best route to take. Not to tell the rest of the crew about the radiation plume or the parameters that we're operating in.
So, a question about were other people hurt, or other people speaking up in terms of being hurt? And we know formally that the military says you signed the paper and they're not responsible. Is there any sympathy within the ranks up the chain, unofficially, any acknowledgement that you both are sick and maybe other people are?
There's over 100 other people involved in the lawsuit. We're the only two that we know of we had a small department, and it's just rare for us. We go outside to do the flags and stuff, but it's so small. The rest of the people are from air department. So there are a lot of people. We don't know them personally. It's such a big ship, but we're talking to them and everything, and so they already came forward, and they're involved. And
there's actually, since our interview last night that aired on TV, a bunch of people have emailed Jamie, higher ups, senior chiefs, saying that they were sick. and I think they're going to try to get involved. A lot of the other people we didn't know, and we kind of talked to through our lawyer, Paul, and find out about their stories.
And is there any attempt, oftentimes when soldiers speak out, they're degraded, they're called sissies, they can't take it. Has there been any kind of attempt to shut you down, to degrade you, to silence you?
Not yet.
We're afraid of that, but not yet.
I'm just wondering, have you talked with attorneys about the validity of this evidently coerced waiver that you had to sign? Can it be challenged?
From the time you join until you get out, you lose all your rights. When you're joining to go to boot camp, you have to sign paperwork saying that you're now property of the United States government, so you can't sue them for anything, and then that was just another reinsurance.
Our lawyer does have he does, well, he is aware of it, and we're trying to find copies of it somewhere.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yes.
Hi, Shane, you said that it was about a month and a half that you didn't know that this had happened.
Mm-hmm.
The two of you were on the same ship?
Yes.
Okay. But yet you said that you were supposed to not tell anyone. Can you explain?
Well, so we, in any kind of situation like that, they cut off the cable, internet, phones, so that you can't really get rumors, you can't get bad information, you can't share information, just as a protective measure. So we didn't know that this had happened, and when they did, probably about a month, maybe around a month and a half later, tell us, hey, we need to draw this radiation plume to stay out of. But don't tell everybody else, because it's really safe. We're just taking precautionary, and we don't want to everybody on the ship to get all worried, and everybody it would cause an uproar of 5,000 people. So.
Actually, we were told that it was we never knew that the plants actually blew up. We were told that it was a small leak, and they were just taking precaution. That's why we were putting it on a chart, and it would be. They would update the digital part, so because there was digital touch screens all on the bridge of where we were and where the ship was in relativity to land, and they would update it, our department head, and then they would have us updated on the charts, on the paper charts. So every day, like, the parameter would change, and we would put down a new territory where we couldn't go in, and then finally it just stayed in that area, and they told us not to go out and add to the rumor mill. Because right now they were just taking precautions not to get everybody to get all panicky.
So as young people who enlisted, you must have felt very betrayed, and you must still be having that feeling.
Yeah, it's a hard, it's still kind of, like he said, we sometimes are brainwashed into thinking that, oh, everything's fine, they wouldn't do that to us. So it's a weird situation to be in.
When this was going on, there was people trying to commit suicide. There was people trying to get off the ship. It was like you're living in fear every day. It was horrible.
Well, I think we'll wrap it up now for the media specifically, because this is a media conference. Are there any media people who really... Are you a media person?
Yeah, yes, I am. I'm representing the newsletter. Stephanie. I just had one question. Did they offer you protective clothing or protective masks?
No, the only time after we left Japan, 2 months later, we did a scrub down the ship where everybody went outside with the brooms and the soap and the water and scrubbed the ship down with push brooms. And that's the only time we had the chemical, biological, radiological suits on. But
that didn't even have respirators or anything. It was just like a jacket made out of a certain material and a pair of pants and plastic boots and plastic gloves.
That was just a testimony of two. Just two. Just two. I still have another hour's worth, at least, of audio. That's the testimony of two people. Now, did you hear what he said? How some of the higher-ups were given medication and told, and the lower ones weren't? And then the people in the higher chain of command said, what, you didn't get your medication? You see how it works? They all assume that everybody got all the medication. Now, I'm sure the captain of the ship might have known that they didn't have enough meds for everybody on board. And if that's the truth, then he's guilty because he knows that these guys were exposed. Now, if he knows going forward that his crew members were exposed and doesn't say anything about it, doesn't do anything about it, well then, that's a problem. Then he's contributing to part of the criminal behavior. If there's people that served on board that ship, and they know, and they're just afraid to come out, you need to come out, because these people are suffering because you people didn't say anything and aren't saying anything. This needs to be all over the place. Why wasn't this press conference and these questions covered by the mainstream media? Gee, I wonder why. Wonder why MSNBC doesn't cover it. GE, we bring good things to life. Like total devastation of the Northern Hemisphere. Ladies and gentlemen, this stuff's real. Fukushima is really a problem. So you just heard from two people. Now you heard how they were exposed. The one guy, he went out just to get the flag. What about all those people on the deck that recover the helicopters all day long? And the jets. Pilots were given potassium iodide because they were flying through it. How come the deck handlers, the crew out on the deck, how come they weren't given anything? All those helo crews, all those guys that were loading up pallets full of food, how come they weren't given anything? Doesn't that make you mad? Do you know how many people were exposed on board that ship? The whole ship's company. And by the way, to the people that were on board, maybe, perhaps you might know about it. The captain, maybe you know. Maybe you know something was up. And you took potassium iodide. I think that's only going to protect your thyroid. You're going to have other problems, Captain. You all will. So I suggest you do the right thing and open your mouth. And the rest of you people on board that ship, I feel bad. Anybody in dry dock? Oh my God, it was in dry dock for a year. You start grinding the metal. There's radioactive material on the metal that you don't even realize is there. You're wearing a little paper crappy mask and some goggles to protect you from sparks. Metal grinder goes up in the air. A couple hot particles in your lungs. You got lung cancer a year later and you don't know why. We should start keeping tabs on how many crew members of the Ronald Reagan have died since his trip to Japan there to aid after the earthquake and tsunami. Anyway, stay tuned. Hour 2 coming up. More testimony. Don't go anywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I am your host, Popeye from FederalJack.com. It is January 16th, 2014. Talking about the sailors aboard the Ronald Reagan tonight being exposed to the radiation from Fukushima. I'm spending as much time as I can on this subject tonight, even if it takes up the entire broadcast. I do not care. I want you to hear what these people have to say. It's important. What they're going through, other people in this country are going to be going through. People on the West Coast are probably going through this. There's a cancer spike over on the West Coast in a Malibu high school, not too far from the coast. They actually received sea spray from the coast. 3 teachers have cancer already, and all the other teachers are freaking out, so they've actually closed the school down and they're moving it to a different location, the classes. But don't worry about Fukushima. The radiation's not going to get you. Go back to sleep. What do they say? The solution to pollution is dilution. Radioactive tuna. I told my father about the radioactive tuna. And he had the same reaction that even I had when I first started reading about it. He said to me, well, what, do I stop eating tuna? Well, no. I mean, there's certain areas you could probably get tuna from. But even if you were buying tuna from the Great Lakes, to be quite honest with you, it's in question. All of that is in question. Honestly, people go, what should I do? Get a Geiger counter. I would buy a Geiger counter, and I would take it with you when you go shopping. They're small handheld ones now. Take it with you when you go shopping. You buy a can of tuna, run the thing over it. If it starts pinging, don't buy the tuna. If the store manager comes over to you and says, what are you doing? You say, well, I'm shopping for food, and I want to make sure that my food that I'm getting isn't irradiated because there is some stuff from California. And unfortunately, the tuna that I was going to purchase is pinging off the charts. Just so you know, I would take care of that. And then continue about your shopping. If he harasses you, you say, it's a Geiger counter, I'm allowed to have it. It's not illegal, and I want to make sure I'm not buying irradiated food. I mean, don't go in there with a film crew trying to make a freaking... And if you're going to make a YouTube video, please be smart about it. Be nonchalant when you're using your camera phone. Maybe use a little clip-on camera or something and clip it to your shirt or something and do it. Sleight of hand. Don't be so obvious. They are watching you on those cameras, by the way. Anyway, I would carry around a Geiger counter. Anyway, the plight of the U.S.S. Ronald Reagan sailors. Sailing right into a plume of radiation. Let's hear what their two attorneys have to say, and then you're going to hear from a few of the... you're going to hear from a Marine that was stationed on board, and you're going to hear from another Navy sailor. And you're going to hear about their health problems. Let's hear what they have to say. This one's a few minutes long. And then I got another story, separate one, that's actually in mainstream news. Another one, and I don't know if he has joined up with this group. Probably the attorneys reached out to him, but they're starting a huge class action lawsuit against TEPCO. See, you can't sue the United States military. Yeah, it's part of the contract you sign. There's actually, and I forget what the name of the law is. It's the something act. I can't remember what it is now, but anyway, you can't, when you're in the military, say you get hurt and they expose you to DU, right? They lie to you and don't tell you that DU causes cancer, and 50 years later, or Agent Orange, okay? You can't go ahead and turn around and sue the military and say, well, you guys lied to me and everything. Just like you could a corporation, okay? You could sue a corporation, even though that's a whole another mess getting into what the U.S. really is and isn't in corporations and everything else. Technically, you could sue a corporation, right? If you worked for... a defense contracting company or something, and you were exposed to something and they lied to you, you could sue them in court. You could do so unless, of course, you signed some sort of contract that said you couldn't. But you still could sue them, go after them. The legality of the lawsuit would probably be thrown out by their lawyers, whatever. It doesn't matter. The point is you could still sue them in court. Military, you can't. At all. So they had to sue TEPCO. They had no choice. But like that one woman said that was speaking with the two quartermasters at the press conference. The Navy lied. The government lied. It doesn't matter. Somewhere in the food chain, somebody had to have known, and I agree. Even if, like I said in the beginning of the broadcast, where we don't blame any of the ship's company, okay, we blame somebody higher up than the ship's company. And even, like I said, if there's foreknowledge, the captain knew and hid certain things, whatever, that's a whole separate issue. But somebody somewhere knew. Because if somebody's that stupid, where you had people on YouTube making videos, average everyday Americans screaming, going, oh my God, this is bad. People in Europe going, oh my God, this is bad. People in Japan going, oh my God, this is bad. But all the government officials all over the world that are involved in this and in the military, nobody has that same reaction. Nobody knew that this was bad. Come on. Come on. I was born at night, but not last night.
Plaintiffs are military personnel who were operating aboard the U.S.S. Ronald Reagan or other ships within the 7th Fleet, including the Washington, the Preble, and several others. And they were performing a humanitarian mission known as Operation Tomodachi to deliver food and supplies and clothing to the people who were ravaged by the earthquake and tsunami.
We represent 51 young sailors, many of whom in their 20s, who have various illnesses. For example, we have a 22-year-old kid who's now blind in both eyes. He has a tumor. He also has leukemia. No one in his family has ever had these kinds of problems before. Many of our plaintiffs have various illnesses such as testicular cancer, excessive menstrual bleeding, various gynecological problems that have surfaced without any kind of family history. And the only causation that can be connected to these medical life-threatening issues is their exposure to radiation in this Operation Tomodachi.
So the thrust of our case is that these people were never warned about the true situation on the ground and the fact that they would be entering into a radioactive zone, such that they would all receive what's been described as low-dose radiation, but it was repetitively given to them over days. I mean, from March 12th for at least 3 weeks, in some instances longer. So the thrust of our case is basically that the Tokyo Electric Power Company was operating a facility that they knew was a problem.
These U.S. sailors went in to deliver water, to deliver food. They did not go in to battle radiation. And TEPCO, the company that operates this power plant, misled the United States Navy regarding the level of the radiation. So these soldiers went out, many of whom jumped into water to rescue people, not knowing that at the very moment that they were swimming in this water, TEPCO was releasing millions of gallons of radioactive water into the Pacific. And so 2.5 years later, they are now stricken with these life-threatening illnesses. So we are suing at this juncture for an unspecified amount of damages. We're suing this foreign corporation because they are doing business in America. Their second largest office outside of Tokyo is in Washington, D.C. This foreign corporation caused harm to American rescuers. And they did it in a way that give rise to jurisdiction here in this country. Specifically, the U.S.S. Ronald Reagan and many of the Seventh Fleet were based right here in San Diego. So that's why we're in the federal court in San Diego.
There is a bar known as the Ferris Doctrine, which prevents service people from suing the military for situations that occur during their performance of their duties.
That's the aforementioned law I was speaking of a few minutes ago, that you cannot sue the United States government or the military for anything that you're exposed to or injured or whatnot while you're in the Ferris Doctrine. That's what it was. I could not remember what it was. That's it.
But the real reason is because the U.S. military is not responsible for the victimization of these people. It's the Tokyo Electric Power Company people.
I joined the Navy and in hopes of getting out of Palm Springs, and I ended up on the U.S.S. Ronald Reagan. I launched and recovered aircraft on board the U.S.S. Reagan, so if there needed to be a jet launched or a helicopter launched, we were there to see it happen. As soon as you kind of stepped foot on the flight deck and kind of went outside, you had this taste of like aluminum foil, and it was cold, and there was just a different type of atmosphere. There was a lot of debris in the water, and we just weren't concerned about what was going on with the whole radiation and any of that. Our concern was getting our food and providing humanitarian assistance to those that were in need on the coastline.
We set up base in a hangar, and we did humanitarian missions. We flew water and food to the Japanese people surrounding the nuclear reactors. And my job, I was maintenance admin, so I kept track of logbooks and stuff like that. But Marines, when you have downtime, you work on the aircraft as well. So I actually helped decontaminate the aircraft, wash the aircraft, and I actually touched a lot of the contaminated parts because we replaced a lot of parts because of the contamination.
And if you remember from the first hour, the guy at the end of where I stopped playing it because they were just taking a couple of random questions here and there. But when I had stopped it, there were a guy a couple minutes after I stopped it, right before that, a gentleman from I think he had worked for the Department of Energy, he said, if I remember correctly, and he talked about how actually the worst of the exposure, like people that got more heavily exposed, were actually the people that ended up decontaminating, and I'm doing air quotes, decontaminating equipment or helicopters or planes or whatever, any type of equipment. The people that were decontaminating it, remember, go back and listen, he said that they got more exposure because they're decontaminating all of this stuff. So they're standing there and all this radioactive stuff's coming by. They're constantly getting exposed to, these doses of radiation. And this guy, one of the people affected, you just heard him say, what was he doing? Remember, just because you're the storekeeper or whatever, you're not a combat position, but you have something else, you're engineer or whatever, everybody pulls double duty. In this Coast Guard, we pulled triple and quadruple duty. It was ridiculous. You'd have cooks that were also gunners. I mean, that's the way it is. And it's the same thing here. So in their downtime, he doesn't just go work in the whatever. He was, he took care of admin paperwork. So it's not like he was. I guess he'd be the equivalent of a yeoman in the Navy or the Coast Guard. So he kind of did the same job, right? But when they're not on duty, they have to do other duties. They have secondary duties. You're not just sitting around. So this guy who was inside, remember what I said about being inside the ship, ladies and gentlemen. Remember, I said that earlier in hour one. I said, they're going to tell you we, quote-unquote, decontaminated the ship, but if people are contaminated and going in the ship, I don't care if they have, quote-unquote, decontamination zones going in and out. I'm willing to bet somebody inside that ship, because remember, even if they got, quote-unquote, decontaminated and they're exposed, I'm willing to bet that there's still something on them, in them. What about the urine? If they're exposed on the inside and they pee, that all goes into the tanks and eventually it gets flushed out into the ocean. But it's all throughout the piping system now. So technically, you now have irradiated whatever all throughout the piping system inside that whole ship. The damage controlman, the snipes. That's what I did. What happens when they have to go chase a pipe or something? Or flush a system? One of them gets some water on them. It's just gray water. Go wash it off. Oh, but it's got cesium-137 in it, or God knows what else. So there are ways that stuff gets inside that ship. And again, it was just in dry dock. Grinding, sanding. I know what happens to a ship in dry dock. Grinding the rust away, sanding, welding. How many civilian workers for whatever company, because you'll have a certain amount of the ship's company that stays on and helps complete the dry dock experience. It's not all civilians. But how many people that stayed on ship's company were exposed? A, underway, B, when they get back, and then C, how many civilians in the dry docks were exposed?
I want to say a number, maybe 16 engines we replaced, which is crazy. All my commander said was we wrote the handbook on aircraft radiation. So when an aircraft was contaminated, they just replaced it because they didn't know the cause. Maybe corrosion could occur. So as soon as the Navy detected the radiation, we replaced it. So I'm not sure if there was anything physically wrong with the engines when they replaced it, but they were contaminated, so we replaced it. We had 7 helicopters, so each helicopter has 2 engines, and we replaced around 16 engines.
And so that's unusual?
That's beyond unusual.
Our ship provided nearly all of our food. The entire ship's company, we didn't really have any food rations after, but we were more concerned with people who didn't have any food or any place to stay. So we ended up giving all of our food. We had individuals coming up with personal stuff like blankets and clothes and stuff, and we did everything possible to get the food on the helicopters and to the mainland as quick as possible.
We had Navy around with their detectors and suits and stuff, and they detected high radiation. A lot of the flyers and pilots, they removed their gear They took their gear, their boots, their flight suits, all that stuff. And it wasn't until a couple weeks after that they ended up giving us paint suits. They call it protective gear, but it looked like paint suits. So we were unprotected for several weeks.
My entire time there, we spent the majority of our day getting aircraft off the boat that had first aid equipment and food and supplies and stuff like that. And then we'd spend the rest of our day going down through the decontamination area, and that was kind of a whole other experience itself. It went as far as them putting rubber boots on top of our work boots, and that was the only preventative from us and the outside elements, the radiation on the deck. So when we came down from the flight deck and went through decontamination.
I gotta pause that for a second. The only thing these people were given when they were going out on a flight deck, open air, exposed to known radiation in the open air, half of them weren't even given potassium iodide to protect their thyroid glands. I'm willing to bet this young lady wasn't, because you'll hear about her thyroid problems in a second. But she was part of the crew that recovered helicopters. And what did they give them? What did the military give them in the 21st century? Come on, Popeye, you bash the military too much. Really? What did they give their sailors as protective gear? Rubber boots. Rubber boots. Shame on whoever had that call. And again, if that goes up to the old man or whoever was in charge of that. See, I don't blame them for the radiation from Fukushima and heading into it, because obviously they were told to go in there and told it was safe. But at a certain point, they had to have known. They should have taken better precautions. There's still failure in the leadership, and that's where you hold them accountable. Again, I don't blame them for the radiation plume itself, but I blame them for things like that. Rubber boots? That's what you give your sailors to protect themselves from radiation. In the 21st frigging century, this is what we're doing. And people wonder why I say don't join the military now. Oh, Papa, you're a vet. Don't you think it's an honor tradition? Not anymore. I'm tired of seeing kids being lied to and being exposed and killed like this. People's lives being ruined. Don't worry, here's a pair of rubber boots. That'll protect you from the Fukushima radiation. It's the same government that's telling you right now not to worry about it. The reason I'm talking about this because I'm trying to get you to think, ladies and gentlemen. Don't be afraid. A little bit of fear is good for you. Yeah, I guess you should fear the radiation somewhat, but don't be, oh my God. Logic. Think. But understand that it's not false and that it is a real problem. And just because the government's telling you, oh, don't worry about it, guess what? You should be slightly concerned. But back to the Reagan sailors.
They would scrub our boots and take readings off of our clothing, and if we had articles of clothing that were contaminated, they made us take it off. And oftentimes there are people who were stripping down completely behind curtains and were putting on little cloth suits so they can walk back to the berthing and change because they had their entire clothing taken away, and we weren't really prepared for any of that.
I received no protection, but like I said, I was maintenance administration, so but a Marine always helps out with every job when you have downtime. So when we transported the contaminated parts to the supply, I was in contact with the contaminated parts to replace them.
The first helicopter that came back with radiation, the boat was kind of unsure what to do with it. We had never, from my understanding, the Navy had never been in a situation like that before where they were exposed to radiation, and they had a high amount of personnel who were going to be exposed.
By the way, where's all the training for if there was a radiological attack? What happens if you're in the middle of fighting and the country you're fighting lights off a dirty bomb near your ship? mini nuke or something. You're going to tell me they don't have contingencies for that? I mean, think about it. They're telling you they don't have contingencies for what to do with a helicopter when it comes back irradiated to their deck. As a former sailor, I find that really scary. You guys don't have contingency plans? All of those drills and the training that we've gone through? Joe knows what I'm talking about. What about all that? You don't maybe fall back to that and look through the books? Let's see. What to do with irradiated equipment? You don't have that? Really? That's not in a book somewhere? The whole quote-unquote Cold War? The Russians are going to get us? I'm doing air quotes when I say that. Ooh, they're going to nuke us. Hide under your desk and rubber boots on the deck are the best the government can offer you. The hide on your desk reference is, just in case anybody doesn't remember, my generation growing up, it wasn't Al-Qaeda in the closet that was bad. It was the Ruskies, and they used to have us do bomb drills, and they used to make us climb under our desks. By the way, how that is going to stop an atomic weapon from wiping out your school. Everything else will be decimated around you except the people hiding under their desks, right? Really? Anyway, let's get back to the Reagan sailors.
I honestly don't think the Navy was ready to handle everything that happened, so the procedures were kind of jumbled a little bit, and you could tell the entire command was concerned because they were trying to do everything possible that they could to take care of us. I mean, we couldn't get any assistance from ships because ships weren't allowed to come in the area that weren't already exposed to radiation, and no ports would let us in. Japan wouldn't let us in because we had too much radiation. Guam wouldn't let us in. Korea.
What we do know is the only standard that has been accepted worldwide is the fact that there's no safe level of radiation.
There was around 5,500 on the boat at the time. Not everybody was exposed to the outdoor elements. I want to assume that the people that were on the deck 24/7 getting these helicopters and food off the deck were the ones that were exposed the most because not too many people could say they were standing on the flight deck and were tasting foil at 9 in the morning. We thought that we had felt a plume because there was like kind of this warm air that kind of went past the ship, and you could kind of tell in the differences between like jet exhaust, and we didn't have any jets going around at the time, and I don't know, it was like 20 degrees outside and you could feel this kind of warm air, and you kind of enjoyed it at first, but then you're like, sir, is that aluminum foil that I taste? We had it in the air, in the water, it was everywhere. There was a point where I was downstairs getting water right before I had to go back up top, and I was filling up my Camelback, which is a big jug that has, water you can put on your shoulders and stuff. And the ship's captain came on board and secured communications and said,
I'm going to pause it right there because the break's sneaking up. And I will continue playing this. We're almost done with this piece, and then I have one more. I'll play it on the other side. Just wait till you hear she's filling her Camelback and they secure communications. Wait till you hear what the ship's captain comes on board and says, as people have already been filling their Camelbacks. Just wait. I bet you can guess. Stay tuned. All right, we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get right back into it. Finish the audio from the last two sailors that I've been playing aboard the U.S.S. Ronald Reagan, exposed to radiation from Fukushima. And I still have one more, but this one's from a mainstream media report. The reason I'm showing you is, look, 3 different sources, 3 different sets of people, all on board that huge ship. Remember, she said the ship's company, about 5,500 sailors and Marines on board that thing at the time. I'm willing to bet they were all exposed one way or another. But the more heavily exposed, the ones that are getting sick now, the ones that are on deck, the lower exposure rates will get sick later on. Probably be retired, won't even realize why they're sick. It's one of the things the military knows about, by the way, and they rely on that. They're scumbags like that. They don't care about you. Look, I'm the anti-recruiter. You want to defend your country, it's honorable. That's why I signed up. I get it. It's one of the things that drove me. I wanted to protect my nation. I wanted to serve this country. I wanted to do the honorable thing, protect the Constitution. Look what they do to you right now. Use your head. And if you think pushing your kid into the military right now is a good thing, perhaps you should pay attention to the rest of the broadcast. Anyway, let's get back to it. Here we go. So, when we went to break, you were hearing how this young lady, the audio that you've been hearing from, she was going on deck, recovering helicopters. You know, that was her job. So she's below deck, taking a break, filling her Camelback with some much-needed H2O to stay hydrated and go back out on deck and work. And the ship's captain secures communication to tell them this.
We're not going to allow any communication outboard the ship right now because we have a little situation going on. It proceeds to tell us that all potable water is now contaminated, and we have people who are drinking the water, people who are showering in the water, people who depend on this water. It's like we've been drinking this water for how many days now, and you're just telling us it's contaminated. At first we wanted to point the blame at the commanders on our ship, but we were completely ignorant to the fact that they didn't know either, that we were literally running for our lives from this radiation. And TEPCO ultimately would have told the truth about the radiation plume that they were releasing. We wouldn't have been a mile away from the reactor plant. I mean,
really what is the core of what we're talking about here is not what the U.S. military should have known, right? We're talking about a military that was responding to a humanitarian emergency. It's not a military that is going in thinking, okay, we have to be aware that there could be this possible radiation from this meltdown because...
Now, this guy that's talking is one of the attorneys. And, okay, he's laying the military off the hook. I won't, because, again... you guys didn't train for explosions and, you know, oh my god, atomic warfare, atomic weapons, nuclear warfare, oh my god. What about all the training for all the fallout? You didn't possibly think, well, see, there's a nuke power plant, they had an explosion, probably radiation, but hey, don't worry about it. Right. So I don't let them off the hook, but I understand where he's coming from too. He's the attorney for them, and remember, they have to go at, they have to look like they're going after, only aiming at TEPCO. I get it. I lawyers speak, but again, military is not off the hook on this one.
That wasn't something that TEPCO was making available, making known to people. Is TEPCO providing their own government with proper information? No. So we can expect that the decisions that are going to be made by the men and women in control of the ship are going to be only as good as the information they're provided with. We do know that once they got on the ground and they learned more about what levels of radiation were there, they moved the ship further away from the coast. And that's what should have been known and could have been known, could have been told to them by the TEPCO executives and the TEPCO officials before they got there, while they were on the way.
I want to say this radiation plume followed us because we could not get rid of it. No matter where we went, it was like we were being... The ship was, commander was coming on, he was telling us that we're going to hit another radiation plume, you know, and then it got to the point where, hey, the water is contaminated, we're going to have to lock down, and we're going to go on the opposite side of Japan and try and get away over there, and as soon as we got there, our water was still contaminated, so it was just, wherever we went, it was an ongoing issue with radiation. We were being chased literally by a death sentence.
I have disc degenerative disease in my lower back, and I have no family history of it, and I have no accident that could have caused it, and I have some digestive problems as well, and stomach pain as well. So it wasn't right after the event, but it was about 6 months to a year after, and as Marines, we don't like to go to medical, so I didn't report the problems while I was still active duty.
The irony out of all of this is that the Tokyo Electric Power Company gets capital infused to it, gets money from the Japanese government.
$1 trillion.
And the Japanese government is a major shareholder in this foreign corporation that has been described already. And they had the largest return from the bailout money that they got in their history. They made more money in the last quarter than they ever made before. And they're not allocating the money to decontamination as they should.
Right now I have a lot of weight issues and thyroid issues that I didn't have before I came in, and issues that I didn't have after I had my child. But I'm just, I personally can't afford to go to a doctor and get checked out like the others can. I'm kind of almost nervous, if you want to say. I'm really nervous to find out what's going to happen.
I would like to be compensated because I don't know what problems are going to arise in the future. If I'm 24 and I already have disc-degenerative disease, I mean, usually that happens to people in their higher 40s and 50s. So I hope nothing comes about it worse. And then the digestive problems, I hope that doesn't worsen as well. I would just like to be compensated in case it does happen.
I have a 4-year-old daughter. Yeah, she's my motivation throughout this.
We also want to bring awareness to the whole world, and specifically to the 70,000 first responders who went to Japan to help in this rescue mission, that they're all at risk. In fact, we're all at risk. This radiated water is going to hit right here in San Diego in the Pacific Ocean in 2015. And this is another testament to say we have to stop nuclear war, nuclear weapons, nuclear power plants. It's not the way to boil water. Each of the nuclear plants that on the planet now are leaking radiation, and they're causing major, major harm. So this is a civil rights environmental lawsuit, not only for the victims, but for everyone who could be affected by nuclear power.
I agree with what he just said. I really do. This isn't just about, I mean, it is about the sailors and what they went through. But it's a much bigger thing, because this exposes, like, we're all being exposed to this. Face it. It's not just the sailors and Marines and airmen and Coast Guardsmen that were over there. No. It's not just about the Army. I feel bad for the guys in the Army that are stationed, in the Marines that are stationed in South Korea. They're a stone's throw away from that thing. China's none too happy about this. I'm sure Russia's not too happy about it because they're going to be exposed to it. They've already got enough problems with Chernobyl. There's radiation from Chernobyl showing up in elk in Oregon in the past. You don't think this is going to come over? During World War II, the Japanese sent firebombs. They floated firebombs, literally, from Japan, across the Pacific, to drop down here. Some of them actually made it. Some of them into Oregon. Now, you're going to say, well, you have radar. That couldn't happen today. Okay, well, radar would pick up an enemy incoming plane, but is it going to pick up a plume of radiation? Well, not if you turn off the radiation detectors. It's not going to. Nope. This kid's got disc degenerative disease, and he's in his 20s. Another one, earlier you heard one of the guys, 22 years old, and he lost vision in both of his eyes, and he's got a huge tumor inside of his skull right behind where his eyes are. That's one of the reasons he's lost, I'm willing to bet, the vision, because the tumor is probably pressing down on the ocular nerve. Where does that come from? No history of it in his family. 22 years old. And they're going to tell you, the government is actually going to have the balls to tell you that, no, the radiation exposure from Fukushima was minimal. There's no way that those people are sick from it. Really, they're lying. Ladies and gentlemen, this is unacceptable. Guess what? That same radiation plume's coming across the Pacific. A wave of it already hit the West Coast. Spike, 1,400 times. Past couple weeks, around Christmas time. What do you think that's from? It might not be as powerful as it was when it was over in Japan, but it's still a wave of radiation that's hitting the West Coast. You think I'm trying to tell you this because I'm trying to scare the crap out of you, or I'm trying to sell you something? I don't have a store on my website that sells you potassium iodide. I don't sell you some super cleanser to cleanse your thyroid out, do I? No. I'm not making any money telling you this. I'm telling you this because this is important. I've told you 1,000 times on air. I wanted to move to Washington State. One of my favorite places in the world. Always wanted to go there. Okay? Never been there, but it's one of my favorite places because of the mountain ranges, the history. I'm not talking about going to Seattle. I'm talking about going and living out in one of the smaller towns out by the mountains. I would have loved to have lived out there. Destroyed. It is destroyed for me. That's gone. Gone. Destroyed. West Coast, I've been to California. Beautiful beaches. Beautiful people. Lots of beautiful women. A lot of them are going to get sick. A lot of people are already getting sick. People's hair is people are having, they know people that their hair is falling out. Liam Sheff and I had this conversation. Why do you think a lot of these movie stars are taking off and leaving? There's a ton of them that are just, we're out of here. Screw this. We don't want to be in the West Coast. We don't want to deal with this. Gee, I wonder why they don't want to be on the West Coast. Anybody think to, maybe ask themselves why these movie stars who own some of these huge mansions, most of them, a lot of them, not every movie star or person with money is an idiot. A lot of them own these things outright. They don't have to pay, they pay their yearly property tax. But they own the property outright, we'll say. They might not even have a mortgage on it. They might have just bought it with cash because they had it like that. Why are they selling their places and moving to the central part of the country or even the East Coast? Why? You think maybe they pay attention? You think maybe they're concerned? Maybe they know somebody. Maybe they've made phone calls. Maybe they've, there are people that do have inside connections. But if these people are selling their houses that they own outright, right? Big mansions, and they're taking off, maybe we should pay attention. And I love one of the cities, I can't remember the name of the city that it was, that the guy recorded the 1,400% spike in radiation, and the video's on YouTube. And I can't remember the name of the city, but the city officials were like, oh, it's background radiation from red-painted eating utensils. I mean, the level of denial, really? This is the problem. This is another problem. This country, nobody wants to own up to the problem. It's like having that family member that doesn't want to go to the doctor because they're afraid they're going to get told they're sick. And then when they finally do go to the doctor and they get told, and again, I'm not pushing for Western medicine or pills or anything, but they finally do go to the doctor because they haven't been feeling well for years. They find out that they've got, cancer, and it's stage 4. Well, maybe they should have found out when it was sooner, or they should have told people when it was sooner. We all know somebody like that. Well, it's the same thing. Denial, fear. So people would laugh because they fear, oh my God, there really could be radiation, rather than, okay, well, that's a fact, let's deal with it. No, they just allow that emotion to control them, and they stick their fingers in their ears and go, la, 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 no radiation, la, 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 no radiation. Very nice. Anyway, final piece of audio. Wheelchair-bound sailor blames radiation exposure from Fukushima for his debilitating injuries, and of course the Department of Defense says no, and that means no benefits for him, no financial help, and no medical help. Trust me, I've been there where you have to fight. You have to fight. The Veterans Affairs, by the way, with that contract we signed, with all the medical records and stuff that are kept, you're supposed to be able to literally, the way it should be is you're supposed to be able to, apply, and then it should, according to the way they tell you it's set up, right, that it should roll and you should get compensated for the damaged things you were exposed to. That's not how it works. The VA has always put the burden of proof on the veteran. Always. It's up to the veteran to prove whether or not you were even in theater, exposed to something, whatever. It's why if you're active duty and you hear this broadcast, if you're active duty and you're listening live right now, you love my broadcast, whatever, before you get out, make sure, A, you go to medical for every little thing, so it's noted, and then you go and you ask medical for a copy of your medical records, even if you have to pay for it. If you have to give them $10 or $15, for whatever, if they try to tell you, well, copy your paper, I'll buy you the friggin' copy your paper. You make sure you walk out with a physical copy of your medical record. That's what I did, and it's one of the only things that saved my ass, because they tried to tell me 3 separate occasions that they lost my medical records. And you know what I did? No problem. I had the original. I went out and made copies of it, the whole thing, and mailed it to them. Certified mail. And they went, and then they suddenly found my original copies. Oh, isn't that amazing? Anyway, let's listen to what happened to this wheelchair-bound sailor who was aboard the Reagan.
It's been called the world's worst nuclear disaster since Chernobyl, the disaster at the Fukushima Daiichi power plant back in 2011.
And while this happened close to 3 years ago and thousands of miles away from here, there are folks right here in the metro who say they're still affected by it. Deborah Alfarone has one man's story.
Steve Simmons never needed any help getting out on the course.
Oh, come on. Even if it is a bad shot, I'm still happy.
Golf, hiking, he's always been the guy that never stops.
I love P90X. In fact, after I did P90X, I also ordered the Insanity workout.
Until November 2011, Steve was 33.
Well, how tough is it to not be able to do that?
I hate it. I absolutely hate it. It's really, something like this is life-changing.
And life changed for this U.S. Naval Administrative Officer 8 months after serving on the U.S.S. Ronald Reagan, when it was the first ship to respond to what's been called the world's worst nuclear disaster since Chernobyl, the March 2011 meltdown at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, the result of being slammed by a powerful tsunami triggered by the most violent earthquake Japan has ever seen. Steve started feeling tired, not himself.
I blacked out on Route 50. And drove my truck up on a curb.
And his new, not even close to normal, began.
You're starting to run fevers, your lymph nodes start swelling, you're having night sweats, you're getting real spastic, and you're losing sensation in your legs, and you can't feel your legs when you're getting a second-degree burn on them. And how do you explain those things?
Doctors couldn't. Steve's leg muscles eventually just giving up.
And I was just in shock.
Steve's then fiancée, now wife, Summer, had just moved cross-country to Maryland with her 3 children to start their lives together. Then this.
Things change. And I borrowed a wedding dress. I started calling around, borrowed a wedding dress. We started looking for a chaplain. And we were married the day before Easter in 2012. In a borrowed wedding gown and his dress whites. And it was the last time that Steve was really able to spend the day on his feet.
I gotta pause it right there for a second. I gotta give his wife some credit. She wasn't even married to this guy. She was dating him. They were still boyfriend and girlfriend, fiancés, whatever. And she knew he was sick. She already had 3 kids. She knew he was getting sick. They had already planned a different life. Suddenly, this hits them. She could have left this dude. I'm not saying she would have been right for doing it. There's a lot of soldiers and Marines and sailors and airmen out there that know what I'm talking about, where they have a hard enough time dealing with this whole change to their being. They're suddenly a new person. The person that they spent their whole life creating and building up is now different physically and that has an effect on you mentally. And a lot of times, people lose their wives. Or if it's a woman, sometimes they lose their husband. Because that person's not strong enough. And by the way, if they ever do that, don't think it's your fault. I mean, I'm sure if sometimes 50-50, whatever, personal, but if interrelationship. But if they leave you because of your disability, that's not your fault. That's their weakness. Don't ever think low of yourself like that. But this woman could have left him. She stayed with him, still married him, and she takes care of him. And you can see that she loves him in the interview. So, good woman. Kudos to you, ma'am.
Steve can now only get around using a wheelchair.
As far as the big picture, we still don't have a diagnosis of what this is, or still struggling to even get a doctor to even acknowledge that radiation had anything to do with it.
And that diagnosis is critical. Without the Navy acknowledging that Steve wouldn't be like this, if it wasn't for his time spent at Operation Tomodachi, his retirement and pension are at stake, and plus he doesn't qualify for aid in the same way he would if he lost his legs in, let's say, an IED explosion. Now, the Department of Defense says radiation levels were safe and were the equivalent to less than a month's exposure to the same natural radiation that you pick up from being near rocks, soil, and the sun. And I can tell you what a lovely couple they are, Derek and Jan. The love there is so strong, but, it just, you wonder, does this have something to do with that? He spent time there. And
I like that the radiation exposure is the same that you would get naturally coming off of rocks or from the sun. It's the government standpoint. All you 18-year-olds, I'm going to join the Navy, man. I'm going to join the Marines, dude. Yeah. Think twice. Please. Please. I know. I understand I was your age, and believe me, being my age now, I know why they target guys your age. Because if they targeted guys my age, Joe, myself, all these other guys, we'd all be like, eat it. I get it. I was 18 once. I was 19. Their target group is 18 to 24. That's their main focus group. That 6-year period, that 6-year swath. Why do you think they aim that young? Because they understand that you're more manipulated. I want you to hear the last 28 seconds. You got to hear what this one woman says. Now, this goes to show you how disconnected and how not knowledgeable about even the slightest things that veterans go through, the general public is. Listen to what the newscaster says. Now, it's common sense what she says if you think about it, but she doesn't realize how bad it is. Listen.
so many other people are having problems too.
Well, regardless of what caused it, we should be taking care of our military, period. It seems so odd that his pension and all that stuff would be at stake, regardless of what caused that.
Well, because he doesn't have a diagnosis, that's the issue. If they could say, oh, it's this, it's radiation.
But he's hurt, though. He's clearly in a wheelchair.
He is. Exactly. That's Catch-22.
You're going to have more on this tomorrow night, 11
I'm
o'clock?
going to have a lot.
Catch-22. You see, she says it doesn't make sense. He got hurt when he was in it. It doesn't make sense. I don't understand. It doesn't make sense because, see, the military has all these little tiny rules, and they play with you. And see, yeah, they understand how the contract works, but the thing is, if they don't give you a medical diagnosis, you're in limbo. And eventually, I don't even know if he's still on. He could be on active duty, but sick leave right now. Whatever. Doesn't matter. Without that diagnosis from a doctor saying, look, his exposure from his time serving on board the ship and the exposure to Fukushima, his whole life is changing. The guy's stuck in a wheelchair now. His medical bills, all that stuff, it's not covered. His whole life. He was going to, obviously, he was an officer in the Navy. He was going to go career. Whole life changed like that. And the government don't even want to help them. That's what's going on with the sailors from the U.S.S. Ronald Reagan. The exposure and the danger from the radiation from Fukushima is real, ladies and gentlemen. We have to take the proper precautions. People need to get the word out. It's a serious issue. Anyway, we're out of time. I love you all. I'll see you all again tomorrow night. The solutions to our problems are most definitely an inside job.